Hi friends, welcome back to Literature Guide. Today's video is about one of the important movements in the 20th century. I am talking about the Beat movement in the 1950s and the early 1960s. The term beat was first employed by Herbert Huncke. Later on, it was used by Jack Kerouac for the beat movement. This video contains information about the origin, definition, meaning and characteristics of the beat movement. The chief members of the beat movement were Herbert Huncke, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Gary Snyder, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, William Burroughs, Michael McClure, Gregory Corso, and Philip Whalen. If you really like the videos produced by this channel, do like and subscribe Literature Guide, and you can also visit a website. The link of the website is there on the screen of this video. You can visit the website and search useful content there on this website. I have recently produced some videos on literary schools and movements such as Cubism and Futurism, Dadaism and Surrealism, Georgian poetry and Imagist movement, pattern poets, pylon poets, and some other videos on the English poetry. If you really like the videos produced by this channel, do like and subscribe Literature Guide. I don't want to waste your time. Let's dive into a video and enjoy the video.
Beat movement. The emergence of the beat movement can be traced during the post-war period of 1950s in America. In literature, the term beat has three meanings. First of all, the term beat refers to a state of being beatific, secondly, it denotes the pulse and beat of music, and thirdly, a sense of being beaten. The term beat denotes striking or knocking something repeatedly. The term beat was first employed by Herbert Huncke, who was addicted to drugs. He wanted to describe his own state of social alienation, disorder and undisciplined way of his life. The term beat generation was later on devised by the American novelist, Jack Kerouac. Some of the chief members of beat movement were Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Gregory Corso, Gary Snyder, William S. Burroughs, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, John Clellon Holmes, Philip Whalen, and Michael McClure. The beat movement was primarily a reaction against the stale and sterile conformity of post-war America. After the Second World War, there was remarkable development in standard of living in society. Many people welcomed and embraced Americanism as a successful social order which needed a little bit of cultural refinement and better values. It was a new version of consumer society. The period of the 1950s reflected relative social advancement accompanied by cultural troubles. The beat writers of the 1950s expressed their hostility to this conformity through art and literature. They denounced conventional middle-class lifestyle and values in America. The images of lonely crowd, closed doors, drawn shaded suburban houses and men clad in grey flannel suit clearly represented the conventional middle-class life. The beat generation of writers disliked the middle-class lifestyle. They were under the spell of Oriental inwardness, French existentialism, and Buddhist mysticism. The beat writers were enticed by drugs, free sex, voluntary poverty, and permissive living in general. Broadly speaking, they were against established prevalent values and culture. The beat artists often performed in public places and coffee houses. They set the scenes of their works in a mythic landscape or in bars, highways, and coffee houses. The beat movement projected an alternative image of communal interaction and energy which put stress on pleasure rather than business. It demonstrated sheer freedom and dissent rather than discipline and order in life. The beat writers put much emphasis on self-expression and self-realization through art. Their bohemian lifestyle and rebellious attitude vividly expressed their opposition to prevailing literary and cultural doctrines of the period. The language of beat poetry as well as fiction was shocking to the literary sensibility of the 1950s. The beat writers presented constant fear of and fascination with their own psychic dissolution. In the poem Ego Confession, Allen Ginsberg has artistically described loneliness and alienation of man and his subordinary role in modern times. He also described the very existence of the autonomous self in a state of doubt and confusion. The beat writers were appalled by the growing regimentation of American cultural and political life in the 1950s. They were shocked by the paranoid suppression of protest. So the beat writers viewed themselves as outsiders who found ways of personal and aesthetic realization in drugs, exile, meditation, and sexual nonconformity. Allen Ginsberg in a collection of poems, Howl and Other Poems adroitly described the insensitivity and heartlessness of contemporary American society. He deemed madness and alienation as a result of the American indifference and insensibility. Allen Ginsberg, one of the pioneers of beat movement, produced a collection of poems, Howl and Other Poems in 1956. It was a reaction against prevailing standards of new criticism. Allen Ginsberg's Howl and Other Poems brought change in the general outlook of people of the early part of 1950s. He challenged the general norms and standards of poetry of the period and adhered to the principles advocated by Walt Whitman. He was greatly influenced by William Burroughs, whose works presented pain and misery of people. Allen Ginsberg tried to create a poetry that contains a heightened subjective and social consciousness. It is important to note that Ginsberg took lessons of yoga meditation and discarded drugs in order to obtain oneness with the processes of life, including death. Like other beat writers, Allen Ginsberg described the pathetic condition of modern alienation and solitariness of man. He conveyed extreme isolation of man in society. Jack Kerouac, one of the pioneers of the beat movement and a poet and novelist, was greatly inspired by Thomas Wolfe. His first novel The Town and the City was published in 1950. But it was Jack Kerouac's novel On the Road that earned name and fame for him. It was published in 1957. The novel deals with an account of his cross-country journey with his friend. Many of Jack Kerouac's novels are imbued with confessional and autobiographical record. It is interesting to note that the novel On the Road was written on a single continuous paper roll. It is a quintessence of the beat fiction. Another famous novel, Dharma Bums of Jack Kerouac, deals with an account of his relationship with his friend Gary Snyder. It was published in 1958. The novel is written in autobiographical vein. Jack Kerouac's novel The Subterranean appeared in 1958. He was not only a novelist but also a poet and essayist. He produced a long poem in 242 stanzas named Mexican City Blues in 1955. Jack Kerouac's essays Essentials of Spontaneous Prose and Beliefs and Techniques for Modern Prose appeared in the Evergreen Review in 1959. In these essays Jack Kerouac has artistically explained the way of writing essays without revising and rewriting them. He practiced his own method of writing while dealing with poetry. William Burroughs occupies important place as a member of the beat movement. He wrote a famous novel, Naked Lunch, which established him as a writer. It was published in 1959 in Paris and in 1962 in America. In the novel, Naked Lunch, Burroughs has described bizarre sexual adventures, violence, and misery in order to convey intense states of consciousness. It is a classic example of beat literature. William Burroughs was influenced by Henry Miller. Henry Miller's seemingly exalted image of the self as a sexual and literary manifestation laid the platform for William Burroughs. His experiments in transcending the limits of autonomy clearly reflect Henry Miller's impact on him. Burroughs's writings are mainly confessional and autobiographical in tone. In his first novel Junkie he has given a fine account of his life as a drug addict. The novel, Junkie, was published in 1953. Other novels of William Burroughs are, The Soft Machine published in 1961, The Wild Boys in 1971 and Cities of Red Nights in 1981. They run along the same themes already handled by the writer. It is important to note that William Burroughs employed two techniques, namely, cut-up technique that involves selection of randomly chosen words from any source and their rearrangement which would defamiliarize them. Another technique employed by Burroughs in painting is shotgun technique. It involves the shooting of a can filled up with paint with a shotgun when placed in front of a canvas from distance, which would result in a fantastic painting. Another renowned member of Beat movement was Gary Snyder, who had great interest in Zen Buddhism and its philosophy. There is a fine blending of serious understanding of Buddhist philosophy with Amerindian myth in the works of Gary Snyder. He produced a series of myth and texts in 1960 and The Black Country in 1968, which contained Snyder's Buddhist philosophical views. Though Gary Snyder was influenced by Ezra Pound, Kenneth Rexroth, and William Carlos Williams, his works reflect originality in his interaction with human and external nature. Gary Snyder's work Mountains and Rivers Without End appeared in 1996, which holds the writer's views on environmental issues. Gary Snyder also wrote essays which appeared in Earth Household in 1969 and Back on the Fire was published in 2007. Lawrence Ferlinghetti played significant role in the Beat movement. He composed poetry collection, A Coney Island of the Mind in 1958. His most famous poem is 1000 Fearful Words for Fidel Castro, published in 1960. Ferlinghetti also wrote a prose narrative, Her, in 1960, and a novel, Love in the Days of Rage, which is set in Paris, France. The novel was published in 2001. Lawrence Ferlinghetti called his work, America I, as part documentary, part public pillow talk, and part personal epic. It is important to note that Lawrence Ferlinghetti published Allen Ginsberg's collection of poems, Howl, for which he was imprisoned in 1956. In his work, Porn on Howl, he described a full account of the trial. The work was published in the Evergreen Review in 1957. Lawrence Ferlinghetti was also one of the pioneers of the publishing house named City Lights Books, which was opened in 1953. It mainly published the beat poetry of the period. It was named after Charlie Chaplin's famous film, City Lights. Gregory Corso and John Clellon Holmes added charm to the beat movement. Gregory Corso composed Gasoline in 1958 and Bomb in 1959. John Clellon Holmes produced novels, Go and Horn, which comprised some features of the beat movement. The beat writers trod on the footsteps of the decadents of the 1890s. They wanted to dwell in the realm of beatific ecstasy through jazz music, Buddhist meditation and drugs. They valued self-expression and self-realization through performing arts. The bohemian lifestyle and rebellious attitude of Beat generation reflected opposition to the prevailing literary and cultural norms. Thus, the Beat generation of the 1950s had its own way of handling and expressing a subject matter, and it had its own principles.
I hope you liked the video. I have already produced many videos on English prose, poetry and drama. You can visit this channel Literature Guide and get useful information on this channel Literature Guide. You can also visit the website. The link of the website is there on the screen. If you really like the content produced by this channel, do like and subscribe Literature Guide, and if you have any views or suggestions, you can put your comment in the comment box below. Meet you soon with a new video.
Please subscribe Literature Guide.